Hey everyone, welcome to the InvestorBet NFL Week 3 betting preview. In this video, I'm going to go through all the Monday games in the NFL. Sunday, if you're watching this over in the USA, which is Monday morning here in Australia. So we have 13 games we're going to cover, which are all the ones listed out right here. And then I'm going to post the following video going through the games for Monday Night Football or Tuesday morning in Australia. We've already had one game so far this week with the Jets, big winners against the Patriots. This was my favorite betting game so far this season, with the Jets winning and Rodgers to go 175 plus passing yards. Very comfortable win on that play. I'm going to run through each game using the Bet Finder tool. So this is where we're using statistics to analyze games, break down team performance, both on offense and defense, and see where their strengths are, whether that's passing, rushing, etc., or where their weaknesses are, and how teams can exploit that. And importantly, how we want to structure our bets based on how the game is expected to play out. So these Bet Finder tools, you can access them for yourself using the link in the description. And then some of the other tools included in the Bet Finder is looking at where teams are strong and weak defensively by position. Do they give up a lot of passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards to running backs? Are the wide receivers more successful? You can see here the Jets don't give up many yards and targets to the wide receivers of the opponent, and whereas the Patriots do, and so on and so forth. So then you can target particular players based on that. And then we have the player trends. So if we go through and look, say the New York Giants, Cleveland Brown, we can see every player, or the key position players, I should say, on the offense, and what they have, the numbers they've generated over the past season and the first 2 weeks of the 2024-25 season. So you can go through, see, for your multis, etc., have they been hitting 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus consistently, or what percentage of the time have they been doing that? And here you can see the different milestones for every single player and what percentage of the time they hit those. So they're just some of the tools, or a stack of other ones included in the Bet Finders. So far this season, we're 2 weeks in, and it's very, very even between home and away sides. Away teams have a slightly better record against the spread. They've covered 16 of the 29 games. We've had 3 pushes so far. Underdogs are 15-14 against the spread, so slightly into the underdogs. What's interesting, just quickly looking at this, favorites that are minus half a point to -5 are 14-8 against the spread. Anytime there's a favorite minus 5.5 or greater, they've failed to cover the spread in any game so far this season based on the closing line. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. From a total points betting perspective, more games have been going under than over the total so far this season. The first game we're going to look at, the New York Giants on the road against the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland, a minus 6.5 point favorites. Line open minus 5.5. It's moved up to 6.5. There's also been a fair bit of money for the Browns. I'm looking at over 80% of the money on the money line is coming for Cleveland. And then the total opened at 43.5 and has moved down to 38.5 for this game. New York lost back-to-back games leading into this. Lost at home to Minnesota in week 1, then on the road against Washington last week. Back-to-back road games for them, not really ideal. They scored 3 touchdowns last week against Washington. However, they've missed their first extra point attempt, and then on their other 2 touchdowns went for 2-point attempts on both and failed to convert any of them. So those 3 extra points that they, if they converted all 3, would have led that to being a 21-21 game. And then the Cleveland Browns lost their opening game at home to Dallas. Then went on the road, beat Jacksonville last week, 18 points to 13, now back at home. Realistically, they should be winning this game. New York played Washington last week and conceded a score on every single possession. So every time Washington got the ball, except for the possession right before halftime where they only had the 1 play with 8 seconds left, every other possession for Washington resulted in a field goal. New York show up in a similar way against Cleveland, which I'm expecting they probably will. Cleveland's going to dominate the possession, and off of that, we'll win this game. I think New York's going to really struggle to score. Can't see them getting over 20 points in this game, especially with limited ball. And Cleveland are a really good defensive side. They haven't been completely at their best. They struggled in week 1 against Dallas, but back to near their best last week versus Jacksonville. You can see here we're looking at last season numbers because until every side has played 3 games, I don't like to start using the current season numbers. I use them only as a reference when looking back at the current season. So, for example, if I'm seeing like for this game, New York were ranked 26th in points conceded last season, and Cleveland ranked 13th in points conceded. Then I'll use a reference from the current season just to see, are they in a similar range or are they completely opposite to that, just to make sure there's no major outliers. But if I had this all updated to the 2024 season stats, currently with every side playing 2 games, that data can be skewed for teams playing, 2 easy opponents or 2 tough opponents, and doesn't give us a full picture of that side. So in these early stages, it's a little bit more complicated to analyze the performance, but once we get through this week, week 4 onwards, the bet finders are going to have current season data, which makes your analyst process and research process for your bets so easy. Like, you're able to fly through your analysis. You're not, clicking around so many different websites. It makes it so easy. Getting back to my point about this game, Cleveland are a really strong defense. I think New York's going to struggle to score against them. I'd be potentially happily playing Cleveland to win this game. They should make yards on the ground. I think they'll control this game on the ground with their rushing attack. Chicago at Indianapolis is the following game. Indianapolis opened -1. It's been pushed out to -1.5. And then the total for this game opened 46.5 and has come down to 43.5 as it currently stands. Betting wise for this game, the majority of the money has been on Chicago so far as the underdog, which is interesting considering the line has moved the opposite way. And then from a total perspective, majority of the money has been on the under, which is forcing that number down. This is a very interesting game. Indianapolis are 0-2 so far to start the season, in desperate need of a win. Slight favorites at home, but it's definitely not an easy matchup. Chicago won their opening game at home against Tennessee, then lost by 6 points last week against Houston. Back-to-back road games for them in a similar situation to the New York Giants. The key to this game for both sides is having success on the ground. I think both sides are going to be able to run the ball pretty well. Both defenses are below average run defenses this season. Indianapolis is the worst in the league. Last season, they are ranked 31st in opponent rushing yards, ranked 10th in opponent rushing yards per attempt. So that's not too bad, but still giving up overall plenty of yards on the ground. Last season, Chicago were a pretty good rush defense. However, so far this season, they're sitting just below average in both rushing yards conceded and yards per attempt. So I think DeAndre Swift, who hasn't had the greatest start to his new career with Chicago, can get a roll on here against this Indianapolis rush defense. You'll notice DeAndre Swift had 30 yards in week 1, 18 yards in week 2. I think you can definitely build on that. He had 10 and 14 attempts. You see last season had majority of games were 50 to 60 plus rushing yard games. And I think he is set for a big week. Also, Jonathan Taylor for the Colts had 103 yards last week, 48 the week prior. Since, a couple of slow games to kick off last season, has been very consistent, hitting 40 plus in every single game. Since then, I think he'll have 50 plus in this matchup. So there'll be plenty of yards made on the ground between these two sides. That's going to be the key. Also be leaning on it to be a lower scoring game, but definitely more keen on the player props and playing those running backs to generate yards on the ground. I feel like it's the best angle for this game. Houston Texans at Minnesota. Houston went up -4 for this game. It's moved down to -1.5 with majority of money coming for Minnesota. And the total opened at 47 and it's moved down to 46. The money on the total has more so been pushing towards the over. So probably will hold around that 46 mark, may go back up to 46.5. This matchup, both sides have started the year really well. Both teams 2-0, so one of them is going to lose their first game of the season here. And personally, I am a little bit surprised Minnesota are an underdog here at home. Last week, they beat San Francisco 23 points to 17. It's obviously been well publicized that the 49ers without Christian McCaffrey. But they were dominant week 1 against New York. keeping them to just a couple of field goals. And then, winning again last week. Back-to-back home games for them. Then the Houston Texans got over the line against Indianapolis last week, and then won by 6 against the Chicago Bears last week at home. Back on the road again. I think they should be underdogs for this game. So if I were to bet in this game, I'd be taking Minnesota to win outright as an underdog. This kind of get a really, really good setup here. With Houston, like their first game this season against Indianapolis, they conceded 27 points in that matchup. Indianapolis followed that up with a 10-point game against Green Bay the following week. Last week, they scored 19 against Chicago, who, are an okay defensive side, but they're definitely not a top defensive side, and still conceded 13 to that Chicago Bears offense. So I really don't think that Houston form coming in, even though they're 2-0, hasn't been that great. And I think Minnesota at home can get the win. So happy to back them to win that game against Houston. The Philadelphia Eagles take on New Orleans Saints. Philadelphia have had back-to-back home games to open the season. This is their first time on the road, and they're underdogs. They're +3. So New Orleans open +3, and they've come all the way into -3 for this game. So markets completely swung around 6 points. Total open 45.5 has moved up to 49.5 points. Majority of the money, 70%, has been coming in on the over. And from a money perspective, majority of the money has been on New Orleans, currently sitting at 58%. Philadelphia won their opening game against Green Bay down in South America. And then the home game in primetime last week, they lost 21 points to 22. And realistically, that they really majorly stuffed up the final couple of minutes of that game. It's kind of become a bit of a habit for the Eagles, something they did a number of times last season, already done it again this season. All they had to do was generate a first down in that final drive, weren't able to do so, and then gave Atlanta the opportunity to come back and win the game, which they were able to do in the space of just a couple of big plays down the field. Then Philadelphia had their chance to come back, overtake the lead, but it ended with an interception. They're going to be keen to, bounce back off that performance, but whether they can get the job done against New Orleans, who've been very, very impressive to start the season, albeit against, potentially an easy draw, but they had 47 points against Carolina in week 1, and then 44 points against Dallas, and just put them out of the game very, very early. And New Orleans are one of these sides that there wasn't much expected of them at the start of this season, but they have started really, really well. I do feel like the market has quickly adjusted to them and their performances so far, but I feel like this is another really winnable game for them. Back at home, they're clearly the better defensive side. They're top 5 in both pass and rush defense, where Philadelphia, their rush defense is currently near, or if not worst, in the league. So I think New Orleans is going to have no trouble working the ball down the field in this game. They're able to pass the ball and run the ball well. Derek Carr can have a big game against this Eagles pass defense, and then Alvin Kamara should be able to make plenty of yards on the ground. Right now, I haven't fully settled on the exact way I want to play this game, but I think it's going to be high scoring because New Orleans is going to find points against this Philadelphia defense. And Philadelphia, just the way they kind of play, they force themselves to hang around in games. They are a good team at, finding points when they need to. So that should lead to New Orleans having to keep on working to put points up, leading it to being a high-scoring game. That should also help Derek Carr's passing yards to go over a high number, because he's going to have to keep on generating plays to keep the Saints in front. And then, if they do get in front, then Kamara will just run the ball and run this Eagles team into the ground. If we look at their averages overall over the past season or so, quickly look at Derek Carr. So he had 200 in week 1, 243 yards in week 2. I think he's going to clear 200 again in this game. And then I think Kamara is going to have another 70, 80 plus rushing yard game, 83 in week 1 and 115 in week 2. Can definitely see Jalen Hurts making yards on the ground as well. He had 85 in week 2 and only 33 in week 1, but he should generate that 30 plus mark once again in this game against New Orleans. I think there's going to be a heavy reliance on him to make plays. So he's going to be looking to throw the ball, and when get in that situation, then the field can open up, allowing him to run. And sometimes, like with Hurts, it can only take one run where it can generate 20, 25 yards from that one run to clear those milestones. So those are the ways that I'll be looking at playing at New Orleans to win. But I definitely more so lean towards those props and it also being a high scoring game. The Green Bay Packers take on Tennessee. Green Bay coming off a win last week against Indianapolis, and Tennessee coming off back-to-back losses to start this season. Tennessee are favorites for this game. The line opened up Packers the 4-point favorites and switched around to Tennessee, now 3-point favorites. Total open 44.5, moved down to 37.5. It is interesting that Tennessee are favorites for this game, considering they are 0-2 to start the season with losses against the Jets and Bears. And Green Bay haven't been super impressive. Close loss to Philadelphia, who then obviously lost to Atlanta the following week. And then a small win against Indianapolis at home. Back on the road here against Tennessee. The key, obviously, for this game is whether Jordan Love plays. Currently listed as questionable. On NFL.com, the insiders that they call themselves is saying that he's unlikely to play. Last week they said Christian McCaffrey, week one, they said McCaffrey was definitely going to play, but then he didn't play. So from this current situation, I would say Love wouldn't play this game, but it's not a game I really want to bet into. I feel like you can't really trust either of these sides. There's no strength, weakness, disadvantage to take advantage of, from a passing or rushing perspective as it currently stands. So I'm just going to let this game go and use it as a reference for future performances and just get a little bit more information on how these teams are playing, especially with Love out of the team for the Packers. I'd probably lean towards it being a lower scoring game, if I had to pick a side. The LA Chargers at Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Steelers are -2.5 for this game. It opened up at -1, and the total opened at 43.5 and has moved down to 35 as it currently stands. Pittsburgh's definitely improved this season so far. The 2-0 to start the season wins against Atlanta and Denver. This is their first home game, so that should advantage them even more. And then the LA Chargers are also 2-0 this season with a home win against the Las Vegas Raiders, and then last week beating the Carolina Panthers 26 points to 3. So this is another game where one of these sides is going to have their first loss of the season. The key, obviously, for the Chargers, Justin Herbert is most likely going to be out for LA, which that alone gives Pittsburgh a huge advantage in this game. If the Chargers can't get their offense going, then it sets it up for Pittsburgh to be a really good chance of winning this game. And I think with Pittsburgh, they're really going to rely on the run here. So far this season, they're averaging almost double the running plays compared to passing plays. And so for Najee Harris for the Steelers, I think he's going to have a big game in this matchup. So Harris down here had 70 yards in week 1, 69 in week 2. Coming off a few big weeks at the end of last season as well. I can definitely see him getting 50+ rushing yards for this game. When I had an initial look, that was paying around $1.70, $1.75 for him to do that. I feel like that's the best betting angle for this game. I think the Steelers can control the game on the ground. That's their MO. And so far this season, the Chargers haven't been a bad rush defense, but this is more about Pittsburgh are expected to win this game. And if they get up, an early lead here, then they're really going to rely on that running game. They're not going to be trying to throw the ball or anything like that. And that should set it up for him to get plenty of yards on the ground. So, even though it's not the ideal matchup for it against a bad rush defense, this is purely based on game situation and Pittsburgh's style of play. The Denver Broncos on the road against Tampa Bay. Denver are 0-2 to start the season with losses against Seattle and Pittsburgh. Against Tampa Bay, who are back at home off back-to-back wins against Washington and then last week against Detroit. The Tampa Bay Bucks have moved from -3 up to -6 for this game. Totals 42.5 down to 41. So what's the trend we've seen is a lot of these totals open at a high number and have moved down. So if you are wanting to bet unders, you definitely want to bet early in a lot of these games. This matchup, I definitely think Tampa Bay should be winning. I don't think it's like super black and white. They're coming off, a solid win against Detroit, 20 points to 16. Detroit missed a lot of opportunities in that game, which we're going to get to when we talk about Detroit's matchup shortly. But yeah, they missed a lot of opportunities, really didn't take their chances. Both pass defenses for this game are really poor. Both sides that goes for. And that's going to lead it to being a high-scoring game. Both QBs are going to air the ball out, as they're going to be their easiest way of scoring points and winning this game. And when you have a game where there's a lot more passing attempts, then it leads to a higher scoring game. Not only you can generate more yards per play, but also if it's a drop pass, then that stops the clock. Whereas rushing play, the clock will keep on ticking. So if you're, betting unders, you want there to be a more of a lean towards running plays, or if you're betting overs, you want there to be a more of a lean towards passing plays, just at an overall, really basic level. The key, obviously, Denver haven't really performed that well on offense. They had 20 points in week 1, 6 points last week against Pittsburgh, who are a good defensive side. But I think the key, Denver can get their offense going this week because the Tampa Bay defense does have key injuries, which should give the Broncos the chance to get some offense rolling. And I think they can score around that 14 to 17 point range, and Tampa can put up 20 to 25 points. And that'll send this game over the total. Could also play both sides at lower numbers. There are a number of ways you can do it, but leaning towards Tampa to be winning. Like there to be a number of passing yards for it to go over the total points line. Carolina at Las Vegas. Carolina 0-2 to start the season. Las Vegas lost their opening game against the Chargers, but then had a big upset win last week against the Baltimore Ravens, 26 points to 23. That's moved them from a -4 up to a -6 for this game, and the total's 43 down to 40. Just straight off the top, a lot of people will look at this game and to see Carolina pretty much rarely ever win a game. So, how could you ever possibly be backing them? And Las Vegas coming off, a big win against Baltimore. How they come through that is going to be key. This is their first home game of the season. And then for Carolina, they're back on the road after being at home last week and only scoring 3 points. Big change for Carolina this week. Andy Dalton takes over for QB for Carolina. They have a lot of room for improvement of what they have been doing, not only at the start of this season, but also last year. He's obviously got plenty of experience, played for the Bengals for quite some time. For this game, there are a few angles that I looked at. Las Vegas pretty much don't run the ball at all, but I think they might have some success doing that. Carolina aren't the greatest rush defense. Don't only just look at the number of yards they concede from running plays, because when teams generate a lead, then they rely heavily on the run, to use up the clock. So that just automatically gives you a high number of rushing yards conceded. But they're still a below average side in yards per attempt. So Las Vegas may have a little bit of success, but majority of their work is going to have to be done through the air based on their own personnel and the way they play. But it's probably just a game the obvious is backing Las Vegas, but I'm just wary of that off their performance last week and a potential letdown spot for them here. And I also do feel like Carolina could hang around a little bit in this game with those changes at QB. They're going to be a better side. They potentially somewhat will stay in the game. And what that'll do, that'll make Las Vegas throw the ball a little bit more. So I'm looking at targeting Devontae Adams and Blake Bowers, their receiving yards to go over, and potentially looking at some milestones for them to do that. So Devontae Adams had 59 in week 1 and 110 in week 2, and Brock Bowers 58 and 98 in the first 2 games this season. So they're going to be the 2 players that I target most likely with my props. Miami on the road against Seattle. Miami won their opening game against Jacksonville then lost big time against Buffalo. They have extended rest coming into this game, so that's definitely in their favor. And Seattle are 2-0 to start the season with wins against Denver and New England. The key for Miami is no Tua in this game, which means the backup is playing quarterback. I still do think they can keep this game somewhat close. Can't see Seattle winning by more than 7 or more than 10 points. Definitely, I think Miami, no matter what, will keep it under the 10 mark. Seattle do have a number of key injuries on offense. So both teams, have been affected in that area. So I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. It's definitely, I can't see it being a shootout. So I'd be leaning towards the unders. Both teams good defensively. Miami struggle against the run. So Seattle could have success running the ball. However, they're a poor rushing side. Where there's only the real negative on a defensive side for either team, the opposite offense is poor in that area. So there's no real edge for either side. Defenses should dominate, low scoring game. And I think Miami can keep this under a double-digit margin. The line currently for it at -4.5. So Seattle are -4.5 point favorites. They opened 2.5 point underdogs with those injuries. That's caused the line to shift. And then the total at 48.5 down to 41.5. I think also the bit of extra time for Miami to prepare for this game is going to help them. Their first 2 games have been at home since their first time traveling this season. So it's not a bad situation for them either. So key is I just definitely wouldn't be surprised to see Miami keep this one close. And also in a low scoring matchup, the way these sides it sets up against each other. Detroit against Arizona. Detroit 3-point favorites for this game. So one of very few road favorites this week. And the total open 51 has moved up slightly to 51.5 points. Detroit lost last week against Tampa Bay and won their opening game against the LA Rams. This is their first game on the road this season. And then Arizona lost their opening game by 6 points against Buffalo. They got out to an early lead in that game. Buffalo rolled over the top, and that form's definitely been franked with Buffalo coming out and winning convincingly against Miami the following week. And then following that game, Arizona had pretty much their biggest win in a long time, beating the LA Rams 41 points to 10. So confidence for them is going to be high coming off of that game. And even though they have a pretty poor record against Detroit over the previous matchups, I think they'll give themselves a good chance of winning this game. I am expecting this to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be a big passing matchup for both sides, so I wouldn't talk you out of playing the QB passing markets and playing the overs for both sides. I think both of them will have 200-plus passing yards, that's for sure. And I do think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Like Arizona had 28 against Buffalo, who are a really good side, and then 41 against the Rams. And then Detroit also had 26 against the Rams and only 16 last week against Tampa. However, they had 7 red zone entries in that game and only scored on one of those attempts. So they left a lot of points out there and probably should have won that game. And that's kind of part of the reason why I'm not super keen on backing Tampa to win, as I feel like Detroit more so lost that game as opposed to Tampa winning it, and looking at more those scoring markets in the Denver-Tampa Bay game. But coming back to the Detroit-Arizona matchup, both sides are top 10 rush defenses, but both are poor pass defenses. So everything in this game sets it up to be a shootout, high scoring, plenty of passing. Look for receiving markets, passing markets, and the total to go over. Don't really have an opinion on the side. I'd lean towards the Cardinals with the value as an underdog, but probably wouldn't back them purely based off that. I feel like there's just been that bit of a reaction from their performance last week. Baltimore Ravens at Dallas Cowboys. This is a very, very interesting game and an important game for both sides for slightly different reasons. These were two teams that there was plenty expected of at the start of the season. Baltimore were third favorite to win the Super Bowl, paying $11 behind the Chiefs and 49ers. And then the Cowboys were $18 to win the Super Bowl at the start of the season. Baltimore 0-2 so far with losses against the Chiefs and Las Vegas. And then Dallas opened the season with a win against Cleveland, but then were horrible last week against New Orleans. For this matchup, Baltimore is currently a 1-point favorite. That line hasn't moved. There's been a little bit of money for the Ravens. Just pushed them up a little bit. And then the totals moved from 48.5 down to 47.5 points. For this game, I really find it hard to see Baltimore going down to an 0-3 start to the season. They were in the matchup pretty much the whole way against Kansas City in week 1, and then kind of blew the game last week against Las Vegas. And I think they bounced back here. Dallas haven't really looked that good. They got the jump on Cleveland in week 1, and then were really, really poor last week. So I feel like there's a little bit of issues for them. They get back-to-back home games. I think they'll be a little bit embarrassed from their performance last week, but I still think Baltimore should be too good. And with the current market, I feel like I could easily have Baltimore a 3 or 4-point favorite for this game. So to get them as a 1-point favorite, I feel like has to be the play. I do think, though, there is some value with Prescott's passing. So backing Dak Prescott to have a big passing game. Baltimore are the #1 team at defending the rush in the league this season. However, they're worst in the league at defending the pass. So Dallas's key to success here is pretty obvious. You got to throw the ball. So I'd be looking at the Cowboys passing markets and also receiving markets for this game. Use the trends that are in the bet finders. Look to target key players, and that should set you up for winning bets on this matchup. I think Baltimore can get over the line, and you could also hit both sides here. If you take Baltimore to win, they get out to an early lead and are able to control the game from in front, and Dallas going to rely on passing the ball, especially if they're trailing, which I feel like they need to do regardless in this game, as they're going to get virtually nowhere on the ground against the Ravens. Then we have a divisional game between the 49ers and LA Rams. The 49ers opened -4.5, they're now -6.5, and the total originally was 49 down to 43.5. The 49ers won their opening game against the New York Jets, but then couldn't get over the line last week against Minnesota. And then the LA Rams are 0-2 to start the season. They conceded 26 against Detroit and then 41 last week against Arizona. This is their first home game of the season, but it's not like an easy home game to kick off with, playing a divisional rival who will be keen to bounce back. Both sides have key injuries on offense, which makes scoring a little bit more difficult. So defense will win this game. I think San Francisco will win. And because they can cover that issue on offense slightly better than the Rams are able to. I think LA is going to struggle to score in this game. So I'll be looking from a betting perspective, playing the 49ers to win. Wouldn't be like super keen on them laying, close to a touchdown. They may cover it, but I'm not like, once I'm laying more than 3 points in an NFL game, I'm not super keen on that play. It has to absolutely stand out. But I do think the 49ers get over the line here and the Rams struggle to score. So you can kind of play those up with each other. The Rams really can't see them scoring over 20 points in this game. They only had 10 last week against Arizona and 20 the week prior against Detroit. And the 49ers are a really good defensive side, so they should be able to limit the Rams' scoring chances. And then the final game that we're going to look at, the Kansas City Chiefs at Atlanta. This is the primetime game, the Sunday night football game. Kansas City -3 for this matchup. We're originally -3.5. It's come down to -3. And the total's held at 46.5. KC are 2-0 to start the season. Both of those games being played at home. They beat Baltimore in week 1 and then got over the line against Cincinnati last week, 26-25. Atlanta lost their opening game against Pittsburgh, then went on the road to Philadelphia and were able to win that game with a last-minute drive to get in front after Philadelphia pretty much blew the game, as we mentioned earlier. With Kansas City, this matchup, they do lose Pacheco, so they're running back. That's obviously a big out because Atlanta are a poor rush defense. So if he was in the side, then it would set up really nicely for KC to win this game and win it fairly comfortably. I feel like Atlanta have been a little bit overrated. Like they were poor against Pittsburgh, and then really shouldn't have won that game last week. Come into this off a short week, playing the Tuesday game or the Monday night football game against Philadelphia. They are back at home, so that's slightly in their advantage. However, playing the multiple Super Bowl champion side isn't really ideal. With Pacheco out, Justin Steele comes in. He should be okay against this Atlanta rush defense. Think like he's played 2 games so far, had limited attempts in both games, and hasn't really made many yards. But against this defense, it should be okay. And realistically, like with Checo out, Patrick Mahomes doesn't have, a super reliable running back, which should put the ball, and he should put the ball in his hands more often, which against Atlanta probably works out for the best. We know Kansas City can find plenty of yards through the air. Atlanta aren't the greatest pass defense, and also Atlanta can see the most QB rushing yards per game so far this season. They did play Philadelphia, so that's going to contribute to that. But they were another side last season as well who did the exact same thing. It's giving up plenty of yards on the ground to quarterbacks. So to also look at Patrick Mahomes rushing yards. I think he can get 25 plus for sure in this game, especially if he's having to, work to keep Kansas City in front, or if it's a close game, then I think he'll definitely get it. So that's definitely a way I'd be looking at it. And then the negatives with Kansas City is they are one of the worst pass defenses in the league. However, that's offset because Atlanta are pretty poor passing offense in themselves. Like a lot of people may just see that, final drive against Philadelphia and be blown away. Kirk Cousins, huge drive, 70 plus yards in a couple of plays. But Philadelphia are one of the worst pass defenses. And, if you take away that singular drive, that brings Atlanta's passing yards down to about 300 overall in the season, which means it's only about 150 average per game. So their poor pass offense offsets Kansas City's poor pass defense. And also, even though they've had, 370-ish yards so far, bring it down to 300 if you remove that last drive. They have played 2 below average pass defenses so far. So, those numbers are also going to be slightly inflated because of that. But definitely like Kansas City to win in prime time. Play them down, get them under that. Well, currently they're -3. So you can also take them as that. I think they get the win here against Atlanta. So those are the 13 games being played on either Sunday if you're watching in the US or Monday morning in Australia. Hopefully this video has given you some insight into your bets on this game. That's my goal with providing it. The video next week is going to have full update with 2024 season data. So for all the bet finders, if you're a member of the NFL Bet Finders, all this will be updated as soon as the games are complete this week. So you're going to be able to use them for analyzing the matchups for the rest of the season. My purpose with sharing the bet finders with you is so that you can be profitable with your bets on the NFL. There's so many angles you can take. You can take sides, totals, margins, etc., which the bet finders have all the information, like how often teams win by certain margins to give you that edge with deciding what bets to put on, but also with your player props. You can go through, analyze the different positional matchups for different sides, see which players are going to be advantage or disadvantage, and then look to target them. Then you've got the trends, and this is just some of the tools. If you click the link under this video to the bet finders, it'll bring you to this page here, which has all the information about the bet finders in general and all the different sports that they cover. So how it covers props, etc. And then if you scroll down, you'll see the section for NFL. Click the join now button. And then select the sports to say it's the NFL, which you can get for $19 a week currently. Then enter your name, full name and email. This is to go through and set up your account. Once you've created your account and signed up, you'll get the instructions to log in to the Bet Finder. This is where all the different bet finders are to unlock the NFL Bet Finder. So you've got the NFL games, position matchup, the trends, the rankings, preseason odds, the win-loss margins, how many points teams score and what ranges that's been between, and then the ATS, total points betting records as well. So everything you need to analyze the games and bet into the matches. So definitely check it out. try it out for yourself, use it for the games coming up and see how it changes your decision making and most importantly, your profits from betting on the NFL. So really appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow I'll post a video for the final two games of week 3 between the Jacksonville Jaguars and Buffalo, and then Washington Commanders and Cincinnati Bengals. So there'll be the final 2 games to complete the week. Also, if you want all my bets on a daily basis, not only on the NFL, but all the other sports bets I'm taking, make sure you check out the Bet Finders. There is the option to get all the Bet Finders for all the different sports as well. So thanks, guys, and good luck this week on the NFL.